Here, in the middle of the Egyptian desert, something strange is happening. These giant green circles have been popping up all over the place. And it looks like a massive river is forming, cutting right through the desert, with dozens of smaller canals running alongside it and more still under construction. There are even tracks in the sand that look like underground pipes. Is Egypt trying to flood the desert? New roads are appearing, along with huge buildings. And then we see this. Military installations. Not just one, but several. So we decide to check it out ourselves, fly in and have someone show us everything, on site. But no one is willing to talk. Some people seem afraid for their own safety. What's going on
The fuck? Discs?
here? The green circle.
What is it called? Vinyl discs.
Circles led us to massive construction projects, carved out of the sand at record speed, to wild plans to flood the desert, to a repressive regime and a country struggling through years of economic crisis, and to a multi-billion-dollar project meant to feed the population, while secretly pursuing entirely different goals.
If you look at satellite pictures of
What?
At record speed, to wild plans to flood the desert, to a repressive regime and a country struggling through years of economic crisis, and to a multi-billion-dollar project meant to feed the population, while secretly pursuing entirely different goals.
if you look at satellite pictures of the country, you can see this change.
What we do know is that it's a military project.
It's quite fascinating to see the colour of a country change.
Their census itself shows you that it's not working.
It's off budget, it's a black box.
Fern.
Our research starts on Google Maps. We find the green circles all over Egypt, including here in the
Bohira Metru. Bohira Metru.
middle of the desert. They don't look that big at first, but when you zoom in, you realize these circles must be hundreds of meters wide. A little to the left, you can already see the outlines of the next circles etched into the sand. We head to the NASA website and pull up some before and after satellite images. Most of these circles seem to have
Is this natural?
appeared within the last 10 years. The description below the images mentions the name for this area, the New Delta. The New Delta is a massive agricultural project run by the Egyptian government. It's meant to achieve several official goals: boost farming, reduce Egypt's dependency on food imports, create jobs, and improve the country's overall food supply. To do that, the project wants to transform almost 10,000 square kilometers of barren wasteland into fertile farmland. Traditionally, farming in Egypt has mostly happened here, along the narrow strip of the Nile and up here in the Nile Delta, right on the Mediterranean coast. Since nearly the entire country is desert, only around 4% of its land can actually be used for agriculture. That's a tiny percentage compared to the other countries. Egypt is home to 116 million people, more than any other country in the Arab world. By 2050, it's expected to reach 175 million. The vast majority lives on this tiny sliver of land. It's one of the most densely populated regions on the planet. Here, people, farms, and factories are all competing for the scarce land near the water. Housing demand keeps rising, forcing farmland to be converted into residential areas. The new delta could change that in one stroke. According to a state-run newspaper, Egypt could expand its arable land by nearly a quarter. And the country could certainly use it.
Food crisis. What? It doesn't make sense.
Security in Egypt has been tight for years. 8.5% of the population are undernourished, according to the Global Hunger Index. 1 in 5 children suffer from stunted growth due to malnutrition. Many staple foods, especially wheat, have to be imported. In 2021, about 80% of Egypt's wheat imports came from just 2 countries, Russia and Ukraine. At the time, that heavy dependence was already a problem for the Egyptian government. A year later, Russia invaded. Wheat shipments grinded to a halt, and the country's already fragile food situation spiraled even further. Egypt hopes to fix this by massively boosting its own agriculture, especially in the new delta. We want to know how the project is doing, but our online research quickly hits a dead end, so we decide to fly there ourselves and see the sudden greeting of the desert. We start making plans, but soon we realize it's not going to be that simple. The moment people hear we want to shoot, they start backing out one by one. They say it's too risky. One expert admits he's worried about his personal safety.
Didn't hear that. Just a sec. See.
Research quickly hits a dead end, so we decide to fly there ourselves and see the sudden greeting of the desert. We start making plans, but soon we realize it's not going to be that simple. The moment people hear we want to shoot, they start backing out one by one. They say it's too risky. One expert admits he's worried about his personal safety. We try everything, but no one will talk to us. We end up reaching out to a good friend in Egypt to see if he can help.
Indeed, it's a bit tricky to discuss critically in Egypt, especially if it's something government funded, of course.
That could explain why nobody wants to speak on the record. The New Delta project isn't run by some random company or even a government department. It's being pushed by the military.
Shit, man. I burnt my arm today. It's like a bitch.
In early 2011, hundreds of thousands of people take to the streets in Cairo, demanding the end of the regime. They're protesting corruption, violence, and the country's ongoing economic crisis. For 18 days, protesters and police face off. In the end, autocratic President Hosni Mubarak resigns after nearly 30 years in power. Millions of Egyptians celebrate the fall of the dictatorship. Hope is in the air. The country holds its first democratic elections in 2012. The majority votes for Mohamed Morsi, an opponent of the old regime and candidate for the Muslim Brotherhood. But things barely improve under his leadership. Just 1 year later, mass protests erupt again until Morsi is overthrown by the military. What follows is a massacre. According to Human Rights Watch, soldiers kill over 1,000 demonstrators during the brutal crackdown on pro-Morsi protest camps. The man behind the coup is General Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. He officially runs for office in 2014, facing off against a token opponent. He ends up winning by a landslide, securing around 97% of the votes. Independent
Hemden Tabashi. Hemdin Sabashi. Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. There are 70 both. 71, 70. Cheap viewers on Steam Brother. Smart link.
observers suspect the election might have been rigged. The new president promises stability, security, and economic growth, but that quiet hope is quickly shattered. El-Sisi drastically reshapes the country, steering it back into dictatorship. Human rights take a steep dive. Peaceful protests are treated as terrorism. The press is silenced. Government critics and journalists are persecuted, arrested, and even tortured. Thousands are still behind bars today, and many have simply vanished without a trace. Speaking out against the regime means putting your life on the line. The same regime also has its hands on the new Delta, just like on virtually every public construction project. If we want to talk to experts about the project, we have to look outside the country. And that's exactly what we do.
When it comes to projects like this, there's really no transparency.
That's Edmund Bauer. We met him in Dubai. He works as a journalist for AGB Insight. He frequently writes for The Guardian, where he published this article on El-Sisi's desert project.
That there's very little concrete information coming out of any of the Egyptian sources about these projects, other than that they're great projects and that they're covering a lot of land, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
That's David Sims. He's an urban planner, economist, and the author of this book, which also dives into Egypt's desert project.
Egypt Desert Dreams. Egypt's Desert Dreams. Development of disaster. Egypt has placed its hopes on developing its vast and empty deserts as the ultimate solution to the country's problem. New cities, new farms, new industrial zones, new tourism resources, new development corridors, all have been provided over the 5 years. And mother Japan took millions of people away from their increasingly crowded Nile Valley into land resources in spite of colonizers, expenditures, and overcrowding. Common pronouncement have been major at best. Today, Egypt is illiterate with stalled schemes, patent project, and for long dreams. Also remains to be uninhabited. Desert dreams are the first attempted kind of Egypt's governmental schemes failed, exposed to many ways of Egypt desert project. Alright, so it's development in the desert of Egypt, projects, schemes, other ways they could build it. When was it made? Doesn't say. What? 2018. 2018. Oh, it was published. Maybe 2015.
They say that the new delta isn't the first mega project of its kind.
You could say it probably has to do with a certain imagery of pioneer spirit. We can conquer the desert. This has been around for a long time.
Over the past 100 years, there have been multiple proposals and concrete plans to flood the desert. During massive undertakings like Egypt's New Delta project, teams have to stay perfectly aligned to make progress. But in meetings, ideas can fly by too fast to capture, miss a few key points, and suddenly decisions get delayed, actions slip through, and the whole team pays the price. That's where Plod comes in. Plod Note Pro is like your own meeting secretary. With one click, it captures everything. Description or scan the QR. And
I bought it. Let's go and watch it here.
natural lowland right in the middle of the desert. Parts of it lie as much as 133 meters below sea level. At the start of the 20th century, out for 20. And this is the Qattara Depression, a natural lowland right in the middle of the desert. Parts of it lie as much as 133 meters below sea level. At the start of the 20th century, people come up with the idea of flooding the depression to create a massive lake, roughly the size of Lake Ontario, not for farming, but for power generation. In 1926, a British geologist lays out a detailed plan. He proposes digging tunnels from the Mediterranean so seawater can flow into the depression. The desert heat would then evaporate the water at the same rate that new water flows in, creating a continuous cycle. Turbines installed in the tunnels would then harness that flow to constantly generate electricity. Water at the Mediterranean so seawater can flow into the detailed plan. He proposes digging tunnels from the Mediterranean so seawater can flow into the depression. The desert heat would then evaporate the water at the same rate that new water flows in, creating a continuous cycle. Turbines installed in the tunnels would then harness that flow to constantly generate electricity. But the costs are too high and the project is stopped. According to Sims, the CIA takes a brief interest in the idea in the 1950s. Then, in the 1970s, a German hydraulic engineer revisits the plans. He proposes detonating 213 nuclear bombs to blow up the entire stretch between the depression and the sea. No tunnels needed. The seawater would simply flow into the depression through a natural river. A German hydraulic engineer revisits the plans. He proposes detonating 213 nuclear bombs to blow up the entire stretch between the depression and the sea. No tunnels needed. The seawater would simply flow into the depression through a natural river. Most recently, in 2023, an Egyptian consulting firm was hired to conduct a feasibility study. But the Qattara project remains a pipe dream to this day. The costs are astronomical. No one knows if it's really doable, and there's a serious risk of salting the groundwater in the process. And those are just a few of the many concerns. In the 1960s, then-President Gamal Abdel Nasser lays the groundwork for the Tushka project, a plan to reclaim a huge stretch of desert in the south for farming, industry, and housing. The project is later revived and expanded under President Mubarak in the 1990s. The idea is to tap man-made Lake Nasser and pump water into new canals to irrigate farmland.
Pushka is in the way in the south. For years was touted as reclaiming 500,000 or 1,000,000 acres of land, and is going to have an enormous population.
Toshka was pitched as the solution to Egypt's demographic and economic problems.
And that was in around the year 2000, 2004. And then it finally appeared that almost none of it was ever done.
Recent satellite images do show some scattered fields, but the promised megacities are nowhere to be seen. And yet, even today, the government keeps clinging to the plans.
It shows, if nothing else, how difficult these projects are and how big the potential is for waste, not just of money.
Then there's the Sinai Project, announced in the late 90s. Once again, huge desert areas were supposed to be reclaimed for agriculture and irrigated by a new canal.
It was called the El Salam Canal.
Part of the canal was actually built and put to use, but most of the project never materialized. There were countless potential problems, from soil salinization and water pollution to coastal areas being eroded by the sea.
So it looks like every one of Egypt's rulers has to have these mega projects to anchor his success and popularity.
But save for a few exceptions, most of these projects fail. The New Delta Project is another attempt to revitalize the city, open up land for crops and communities, and make the country more independent.
Well, that sounds good.
Will it work this time? To grow anything here, you obviously need water. Lots of it.
Yeah.
The project draws from multiple sources: groundwater, polluted water from this lake near Alexandria, and most importantly, the country's lifeline, the Nile. The plans include several canals.
One of the few sources of information is Google Earth. Thank God for Google Earth, because it shows the reality, at least you can see.
The first canal runs here. It channels Nile water from the so-called Rosetta Branch and stretches about 42 kilometers to the eastern limits of the New Delta. You can see several smaller canals shaking across the sand. Some are still under construction and supposed to carry the water deeper into the desert. The second large canal is even more impressive and about 114 kilometers long. It carries a supposed 3.5 billion cubic meters of water each year. Starting at another canal up here and cutting straight
3.5
across of water each year.
3.5 billion. 3.5 billion cubic meters to tons. Convert. Oh shit. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Two, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's 529,720,000 tons. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah. 529,700,000.
here, starting at another canal up here and cutting straight across the desert. The water moves both above and below ground, from station to station. But it doesn't just flow downhill on its own. In some places, it has to be pumped over 100 meters up.
They're taking it off the Nile at an altitude of 16 meters, and they have to pump that up to 120 or 130 meters.
Pumping stations like this one push the water through the waterways, guiding it here to the beating heart of the new delta, Haman, the largest wastewater treatment plant in the world. Built in just 2 years, it was
El Hammam. Hammam. Egypt. What was it?
Haman, the largest wastewater treatment plant.
Wastewater. Hammam. Egypt. Waste water treatment plant. The world's largest facility of its kind located on the north coast of Egypt with a capacity of 7.5 million cubic meters of water per day. Ah, that's a model. Or is that real? That's a model.
Plant in the world. Built in just 2 years, it was completed by June 2023 and sprawls across 320,000 square meters. At the front, 15 massive basins sit side by side. They take in polluted industrial and agricultural wastewater and send it to these 3 treatment plants. The plant can purify up to 7.5 million cubic meters of wastewater per day. That's enough to cover the daily water needs of 24 million people in the US. But the new delta taps another water source besides rivers and lakes. Far below the desert lies the world's largest fossil groundwater reservoir, the Nubian Sandstone Aquifer System. It stretches beneath 4 countries and is estimated to hold between 150,000 and 370,000 cubic kilometers of water. That's more water than the Nile would discharge over the course of 500 years. The water has been trapped here for thousands of years, locked between layers of rock. Now it's pumped up to the surface for the new Delta project. But even this groundwater comes with a catch.
When we talk about the aquifer, it's tempting to think of it as a big tank of water sitting under the country. You can put a straw in it and water comes out. That's not what this is.
No one knows just how much of the water down there can actually be used. And Bauer says that the deeper you go, the saltier the water gets. So there's a real risk that the water pumped up from the aquifer could eventually be too salty to use. And while the reservoir may be huge, it's still finite.
It's not sustainable. You're dealing with water which probably isn't replenished.
The water from all these sources flow through underground pipelines, out to the cultivation areas, and that's where they appear, the green circles. Their shape comes from center pivot irrigation systems. Water sprinklers sweep across the fields like the hands of a clock. You'll find these systems all over the world, in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and even the US. Thanks to them, people can grow corn, peanuts, potatoes, and even wheat right in the middle of the desert. Wheat in particular uses a huge amount of water.
It's better than just flood irrigation, but it's not very efficient water-wise. In other words, you're going to need a lot of water.
The soil has to play along too. Sure, you can grow wheat on dry land, but the desert soil in the new delta is far less fertile than the rich riverbanks along the Nile.
These land reclamation projects in the desert usually only have one crop a year. It's too hot, so they only get one crop a year, whereas in the old lands, you get 2 and 3 crops a year.
To boost yields, farmers use special fertilizers and pesticides. They can be mixed directly into the irrigation water. The Egyptian government claims it's sustainably developing these areas for agriculture, but Edmund Bauer disagrees.
If you look at pictures from above, what you'll see circles of green, which are surrounded by land which is quite clearly still desert. And in fact, under the topsoil in which crops are being grown, it is still desert. And in fact, if you take away the central pivot systems that are irrigating these circles, it will go back to being desert. Nothing has changed.
What?
To the irrigation water. The Egyptian government claims it's sustainably developing these areas for agriculture, but Edmund Bauer disagrees.
If you look at pictures from above, what you'll see circles of green, which are surrounded by land which is quite clearly still desert. And in fact, under the topsoil in which crops are being grown, it is still desert. And in fact, if you take away the central pivot systems that are irrigating these circles, it will go back to being desert. Nothing has changed.
You can already guess from satellite images where new fields are planned. It gives you a sense of just how massive the new delta is planned to be.
And it's 650 meters in diameter. That's about 1.2, 2.4, 4.8. .6. That's
Planned. It gives you a sense of just how massive the new delta is.
so, and that's about half 9.6. If I say that's about 10, 20 kilometers from here to here. So 20 by 20 kilometers. If there's something down there too. If the roads go through. Yeah.
Planned to be. The project is overseen by a government agency. The new delta.
Take 1.2 or 650. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 31, 32, 33, 33 times 33. Yeah, so about 20, so 21 times. There's one there too.
Is planned to be. The project is overseen by a government agency that reports directly to the Egyptian Air Force. As for how much it really costs is anyone's guess.
It's a black box. We don't know how much money has gone into it, and we don't know how much money is coming out, and we don't know where that money is necessarily going.
Running agriculture in the middle of the desert doesn't come cheap. You need processing plants, warehouses, a network of roads and cold storage units, grain silos and artificial rivers. According to The Guardian, the longest canal alone costs around $5 billion. The water treatment plant wasn't exactly a bargain either. Then there's the cost of pumping up the groundwater, and in some places the water from the Nile has to be lifted over 100 meters.
So this is going to be very expensive. As a matter of fact, some of the earlier studies of Egypt's agricultural potential in the desert came to the conclusion that if you have to lift the water more than 30 meters, it's uneconomic. You cannot grow things with a value that will cover the cost of the energy needed to lift it.
In 2021, the New Delta project was presented with a budget of roughly $10.2 billion. But by May 2025, inauguration of the wheat harvest season, President El-Sisi said that the infrastructure alone would cost somewhere between $9 and $13 billion.
In terms of the finances of New Delta, we really have to go on the bits and pieces that get released to us in speeches, in press statements. We have to sort of take them at face value because there isn't clear records being produced.
The New Delta project was pitched as Egypt's answer to its food insecurity. But what has it actually changed so far?
Now, in one sense, this has been so far a successful project in the fact that you can see crops coming out of it.
But much of the harvest never ends up on Egyptians' plates. It's exported.
By all accounts, money has been made off of this project, and you can see that, if nothing else, the export figures, the agricultural export figures.
According to the government, Egypt now exports more than 400 different agricultural products to over 160 countries. In 2023 alone, a record 7.5 million tons of produce left the country, bringing $8.8 million in revenue. Top sellers are fruits, vegetables, and nuts. Egypt is increasingly focusing on high-value export crops, and the New Delta plays a central role in that strategy.
The focus seems to be, and Sisi has more or less said this himself, why would we grow wheat, for example, which we're not going to be competitive in, which you need a lot of water and you need a lot of land, whereas we can grow other crops, citrus crops, for example, we can export them for much more money, and then we can use that money to import wheat.
That's what most countries that are in this kind of situation would do. So you export high value and then you import the wheat, which is what they've always done.
Egypt wants to position itself as a major exporting nation and a key player in Africa. It also aims to build a global hub for the supply and storage of grains to become more resilient to future food crises. But the revenue coming from these multi-billion-dollar projects don't seem to reach ordinary Egyptians. Their lives barely improved at all. 2/3 of the population live at or below the poverty line. Food security remains fragile too. Egypt's state coffers are empty. The currency has taken a massive hit in recent years, and the country is drowning in debt. Bauer says most of the money from New Delta ends up flowing back into the state.
And one thing that they've consistently invested in is weapons. Egypt has got a war on its southern border. There's a civil war in Sudan. There is a war in Gaza on its eastern border. There has been violence to the west. So you can make a good case for buying weapons and investing in defense.
The New Delta project devours massive resources. It's
Fertilizer.
not really sustainable, extremely expensive, and nowhere near delivering the promised food security.
If you're
Yeah.
looking at producing food to feed the country, it will be difficult to do based on using these projects. It's a difficult place to grow wheat. It's a difficult place to grow rice. So there's a very strong case to be made that Egypt will be reliant on food imports for the long run and can start looking at other ways to secure those routes and to secure that supply chain.
Maybe the real value of these mega projects is not about food at all. They generate headlines and distract from the country's real problems. The regime of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi gets to present itself as a capable and proactive.
Because you can make an announcement, you can give an artist's rendition of what this project will look like. You can very quickly claim credit for something, and then hopefully you'll be able to follow through and build it, and you have this large thing that you can unveil. On the surface, it looks like a great answer to lots of intractable problems to do with the growing population and poverty that would be difficult to address in other ways. It's clear why it would be more tempting to go down the route of unveiling new large-scale projects rather than something which would be more of a systemic approach to a problem, and more building institutions.
Earlier this year, the government just unveiled its latest mega project, Jirian City, a brand new city rising out of the desert. In just 5 years, is expected to feature luxury apartments, a yacht harbor, skyscrapers of up to 80 stories, and a free economic zone. Jirian is meant to attract tourists, create new jobs, and pour money into state projects. The era of desert mega projects seems far from over.
That's the future.
Duria.
Economic zone. Jirian is meant to attract tourists
Jurian.
rising out of the desert.
Jurian City. Jurian City. Why there's so many projects in Egypt. Let's see. Jurian City, Egypt. It's not a historic, but a newly planned and launched futuristic urban development in Egypt, west of Cairo. Launched in 2025 by the Egyptian Prime Minister, Jirian will feature a man-made Nile canal, creating a new vision of the Nile civilization blended with sustainable modern architecture. This large-scale project aims to establish a thriving hub for residential, commercial, industrial, and architectural development, creating significant jobs, addressing Egypt's and water concerns. How Egypt is flooding the desert. How Egypt is flooding the desert. Water concerns. That does make sense. Details.
لو ما فيش خاطر نعمل لمين
نيل وهيسيب علامة جديدة. جريان مدينة جديدة على النيل بتوصل بين تاريخنا ومستقبلنا.
Jirian world. Is it all just AI? Jirian City. Is that the Sydney Orchestra place in Australia? A copy.
In just 5 years, is expected to feature luxury apartments, a yacht harbor, skyscrapers of up to 80 stories, and a free economic zone. Jirian is meant to attract tourists, create new jobs, and pour money into state projects. The era of desert mega projects seems far from over.
That's the future. And the government has decided they're all going to go to the desert.
In February 2022, Ethiopia completed a massive gravity dam in the south of its national territory. Its walls reach up as high as the pyramids of Giza, holding back the waters of the Blue Nile, the Nile's most important tributary. Ethiopia plans to double its current energy production thanks to the dam. What marks a milestone for Ethiopia sparks panic downstream. Egypt and Sudan fear they'll receive far less water in the future. That kind of control gives Ethiopia a powerful bargaining chip. The Egyptian government calls the dam an existential threat. Relations between the two countries are tense. Dam kind of control. Egypt and Sudan fear they'll receive far less water in the future. That kind of control gives Ethiopia a powerful bargaining chip. The Egyptian government calls the dam an existential threat. Relations between the two countries are tense. The Nile remains Egypt's lifeline. It has to keep flowing for Cairo's ambitious plans to stand even a remote chance. And with them, any hope for a stable food supply. In the end, the dream of greening the desert hinges on a single precious resource: water.
Already used. We talk. It feels like dangerous going to gamble.